So when I was at Mount Angel Seminary, there's a monastery right next door, huge monastery, Mount Angel Monastery. And there was two monks there that I just think this is an interesting story. One of them, his name was Father Athanasius. And Father Athanasius was brilliant. He was the world's expert on Near Eastern languages at one time. But Father Athanasius, he went a little crazy. And he had a very harsh moral code. And he got upset if anybody broke what he thought was morally right. And even like at the seminary, every year we had subscriptions to magazines, but one, and they'd come to the library, was Sports Illustrated. So when the Sports Illustrated bathing suit edition came out, in the morning it was always the Athanasius, he would take it and he would take a butcher's knife and nail it to the rector's door. Because he had a very harsh morality and he really kind of lost his mind. And the other one was this other monk, Father Henry. And Father Henry was also brilliant. He had 3 PhDs. I mean, just amazingly brilliant. But Father Henry was always joyful. Like, he was always laughing and joyful. And Henry was much different. Henry decided to put, instead of all his moral energy being on people's sins, getting upset with that, he put all his moral energy into becoming the best person he could. And he really was just joyful and in love. And the odd part is, Athanasius hated Henry. And Athanasius, the story of Athanasius is this. Henry and him both get sent to Rome to study. They are brilliant as when they're young monks. Brilliant, but Athanasius, as I said, got very upset with people's moral failings. So you sent him to Rome for the love of God? Like, poor decision. So he goes to Rome, and, there's a lot of problems in Rome. And he literally has a nervous breakdown. And they call Henry that they can't find Athanasius. Henry spends 3 days roaming around Rome, searching for Athanasius, finds him in the gutter, and he's had a mental breakdown. Henry cleans him up and brings him back to Mount Angel. And the odd part is, Athanasius always resented Henry for finding him. And Athanasius, if you met him, he was a nice guy. Like, I loved to go eat in the refectory in the monastery. And if you met Athanasius, like I did, and he was like, "Oh, hello, my name's Father Athanasius." Very friendly, but he would say, "I'm the crazy one." Because the monks, they really do, they're like a family, they're like brothers. And they'll just say, "Oh, that's Athanasius. He went crazy because he was too upset with other people's sins." And they just say it like that. Like, "Oh, he went crazy." But you'd much rather be Henry, who puts all your energy into being the best possible person. And I just think it's amazing that Athanasius, to his dying day, resented that of all people, Henry's the one who searched and saved him. And in this odd way, though, we're supposed to be like Henry, Father Henry, and the readings today really are kind of repeating this same message. That if you have like Moses, it's after Sinai that people are set free from slavery. They have this covenant ceremony where they're engaged to God. Remember, religion is a marriage between us and God. And before the final act of the wedding ceremony, Moses goes up and speaks to God. And the Israelites down there, the wedding's not even over, and they're already cheating on God. And they build the golden calf. And God, this is a really strange story, and God says to Moses, "I tell you what, I'll destroy the people and just save you. I can start a whole nation just with you." And Moses says no. basically says, no, I'm with those people. The broken, the sinners, I'm going to be with them. And so, this is a strange story where Moses defends the people who are clearly sinning. And in Judaism, if you check the Talmud, one of the reasons why Moses was selected as the leader of the people, because he wouldn't give up on those who sinned. He would always go after them. So it was a test from God. And a lot of people in religion today says, well, as long as God saves me, I'm okay. The rest of you guys can burn. God saves me. That's actually the very opposite of what the Bible teaches. Moses is picked as a leader, or is the leader, because he'll go after the lost and the forsaken. And even much so with Christ. Same point is being made in today's story. This, I mentioned it before. The Gospel of Luke is 10 meals with Jesus. So easy. This is meal number 6. And every meal has a moral code. And so this is meal number 6. And at meal number 6, Jesus has invited everybody. The tax collector, the sinner, the prostitute. He welcomes everybody. And they change their lives. And Christ welcomes them. And the Pharisees are so upset. They're outside the house complaining. And they say, he eats with tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus addresses those who are outside the house, mocking those inside the house who are sinners. And he addresses it with 3 parables. Actually 6, but 3 parables called the lost and found parables. They were lost, and let's celebrate because they're found. And then he does 3 surprise parables. The surprise parables are this. You think you're so holy? Surprise, these people you hate, they're making it to heaven and you're not. There you go, a little surprise for you. So he gives these 6 parables. 3 of them we read today, the lost and found. The coin, where the parable is, God is like this woman who loses a penny, nothing. And she searches the whole house, and when she finds a penny, she throws a party for all her neighbors that she found what was lost. The point of it is God is so crazy in love with us that he's like this crazy woman who can celebrate the smallest return. God is crazy in love with us. If the Pharisees get upset because Jesus welcomes all these people, it's because the Pharisees really don't understand who God is. God is radical love, loves to welcome people. Then you have the lost sheep, kind of the same point. He says, what shepherd wouldn't leave the 99 for the one? A crazy one. You're going to stick with your cash crop. You got 99. You're not going to lose the one, so you lose one. You're not going to risk everything. God is so crazy in love with us, he'll risk everything. Goes after the one lost lamb and brings it back. And you have to understand, there's a little bit of an insult here. The insult is this. The Pharisees, they call themselves the shepherds of Israel. Now, the irony there is that, well, technically, it's the priests who are the shepherds, but the priests are corrupt. So, because the priests are corrupt, the Pharisees, they come in there and say, we're going to be the shepherds of Israel. We're going to invent all these religious rules and regulations to control people's morality, and if you break them, we're going to come down hard on you. And so, the joke is, the Pharisees called themselves the shepherds of Israel, but they didn't even like the real shepherds. They didn't like real shepherds because real shepherds couldn't keep all their rules and regulations. So they hated shepherds, number one. Number two, and yet they call themselves shepherds. Moses, if you remember the story, Moses is a shepherd, and he actually goes after the lost and forsaken. And they call themselves shepherds. And a true shepherd, like Moses, goes after the lost and forsaken. They're not doing that. They're standing outside the house, mocking the sheep for their sins. So what Jesus is saying is, you call yourselves shepherds. I'm the one who's doing the real job here. I'm going after the lost and the forsaken. You're not real shepherds. You mock the sheep for their weaknesses. I go after them. Do you get the point? So God is crazy that will go after. A lot of people think that they're religious, but they can't even see they're nothing like God. And the third parable is the most famous, is the prodigal son, where it's actually a horrible name. It should be the lost son, but because prodigal does not mean what you think it means. And there's two sons. Now, everybody always focuses on the younger son. We know that story. Most people who are over 50 know that story personally, that, when you're young, you make some really silly mistakes. He goes to his father and he says, "You're dead to me. I want your money." Well, technically, in Judaism, if a son did that, you could disown him. But he doesn't. He's so in love with the son, he gives him his inheritance. And he goes off and spends his inheritance on the worst vices: wine, women, and golfing. No, it's in there in the Greek somewhere. Spends his life in the worst possible way. Then he comes back, and when he does, the father runs out, grabs him, and welcomes him home, because God is crazy in love with us. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. It's the older son. The older son hears the celebration, and he's resentful. So he comes, but he refuses to go inside the house. And so once again, the father runs outside the house to the older son. And the older son, now what you have to understand, if a child refuses to come back to the parental home when invited and refuses, technically the father could disinherit that son. That's a huge insult to a parent. But the father doesn't disinherit him. He runs out to him. And the older son says this just really ridiculous line of, "I've kept all the moral rules and regulations. I've done everything right. I've obeyed every command." And says, "And when that son of yours," can't even call him a brother. That's insulting. "When that son of yours comes back, when he spent his money on wine, women, and golfing, you welcome him back." And then he complains and says, "You didn't even give me a goat to play with." Don't you long for the days that teenagers would just be happy with a goat? And here's the thing. The son doesn't get what the older son doesn't get what the father's about. Anybody who's been a parent who really does lose a son for one reason or another, you just want your child back. That's all you want. And the odd part is this. The older son, it ends with this question mark. Will the older son come into the father's house or not? And the father's house really symbolizes heaven, right? So think about this. He's obeyed all the moral rules and regulations, and he himself might not be welcomed into heaven because he can't welcome other people. It ends with this question mark. Will the older son come back? The odd part is the older son, who obeyed all the moral rules and regulations, he can't see how he's the one who's lost. You're supposed to live in radical love. Does that make sense? What a surprise that a lot of people who are so scrupulous about morals may not make it to heaven because they can't really welcome their brother. And what an older brother is supposed to do, what he was supposed to do, is that if your younger brother is lost, you should have ran after him and gone after him. That's what a real older brother does. And there's this family here at Holy Apostles. They're brother and sisters, but they're all 60 and 70. And the mother, who's in their 90s, I think this is funny, one Christmas sent out a Christmas card. And she sent out the Christmas card, and she picked this picture because she looked really good in this picture. And she's with just the older son, and she sent it out. And, of course, her children harass her, "Well, why did you send out a Christmas card with just your oldest child?" And so they're harassing her, right? And they really are not upset. They're just joking. And so I joked with the younger brother, who's in his 60s, and I said, "Well, you need to usurp his authority. You need to take control." And he said something serious back, where he says, "No," he says, "I love my brother. I wouldn't want to be the oldest child. I like being the youngest." And he said, "My older brother every time throughout our life, if one of the siblings weren't getting along, he would always bring us back together. He's worked very hard to keep the family together. And to this day, they're actually very united. I just love how the brothers and sisters love each other. But I loved when he says, no, I love my older brother. I wouldn't want to be the older brother. He's worked hard. Isn't that just amazing? That's what an older brother should have done. Not mocked the younger brother for being lost, but gone after him. That's what a true shepherd does. That's what somebody with love does. So think about this. He's telling these parables to the Pharisees who are outside the house, like the older brother, refusing to come in. The point being is that we're the ones who are supposed to go after the lost because, like God, we're crazy in love with other people. And this is meal number 6. I think I said it's my favorite meal. And after Jesus gives these parables, one of the people who are the rejected and lost inside the house then yells out, "Blessed are those who are called to this supper with you." That line, we use it at Mass. You realize that. When the priest holds up the host, the idea is that everybody who's welcome at this table are the type that go after the lost sheep. We don't condemn people for their sins. We bring them back. We're the older brother. And then when you look in heaven the same line is used. At the Feast of the Lamb of God, millions of people are there, angels, and then John sees it where suddenly everything stops. And one of the rejected cry out, "Blessed are those who are called to this supper with you." All those who acted like the older brother, crazy in love, went after the lost, they're gathered together at the Feast of the Lamb of God. They're the ones who don't mock people for their sins. So there's 2 fundamental choices. You can be like the Pharisees and worship at the altar of the golden calf of hatred, thinking that you're better than other people, or you can choose the Feast of the Lamb of God. Whereas a good brother, you go after the lost. You don't mock them. What we rehearse here is we're the type of brothers who brings people together, not tear them apart. And so, together, let us stand and profess our faith.